Welcome back, everybody, to my third volume of interesting Tik Toks. Got my new setup here. Next thing I'm going to work on is some color grading to make this look a little bit better. But thank you for joining me. Let's get into it.
There is a record of technologies that existed on Earth of civilization more advanced than we are now. And the question is, were there some use of some type of electrogravitic levitation technologies that were used? The other problem is, even when the Smithsonian paid $5 million to simulate using mathematics and the technology that archaeologists say existed back in the time of the pyramids, those obelisks like the Washington Monument, but those were all one big piece of stone. They couldn't raise the smallest one with everything we know now about mathematics and engineering with what's been postulated. So there's something doesn't add up there. But I think it's a bridge too far to claim they were built by ETs. But they were certainly, their construction and the precision of the stones cut, how far they were moved, how they were put into place. There are a lot of questions I have, but I have no proof of how that might have happened, except the man I referred to earlier from Redstone Arsenal area, who is given material occasionally, is not always extraterrestrial. He has been given objects that are tens of thousands of years old or older, that are technological, that have been found in the ocean and elsewhere, that were of human origin and were extremely advanced technologies. So I believe that it's likely that on Earth, prior to the modern era, there have been civilizations far advanced beyond where we are, that for which we have very little record. And when that record is found, I think it's kind of swept under the carpet. You know, it's interesting. There were years ago when they did the Mars uh, images, and they found that there were these obelisks and strange looking objects on Mars. I went out to the Goddard Space Flight Center here outside D.C. to meet with Mark Carlotto and some other scientists there, and they said, "Yep, it's been pixelated out for the public, but there are structures there." And though very ancient, but we're talking millions of years old, millions. And I was out in California after I had disclosed this to some people, and a man came up to me from JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs, and I didn't know him. He knew who I was and said, "Dr. Greer, here's the issue. You're right, those exist, but we can't disclose that." I said, "Why? It's not an operational ET device. It's not, it's old." He says, "Yes, but you don't understand how powerful this information is." I said, "Why?" He says, "If this was disclosed, it would collapse the fundamentalist orthodox belief systems of every religion on earth."
That guy's name is Stephen Greer. He's always giving me the heebie jeebies. But in this video, though, I agree with pretty much everything he says. I've always kind of had a feeling that it wasn't so much aliens, that it was just ancient humans. I've always liked the show Ancient Aliens, although I kind of wish it was called like Ancient Things We Have No Idea How They Made. Granted, that's not the best title. But humans being here way longer than recorded history, I mean, even going past the Sumerians, has always been kind of like a thing for me. I recently got into Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. Randall Carlson is the catastrophist who talks about how pretty much every 12,000 years we just get punched by a rock in space. It's not wars, pandemics, zombie outbreaks. It's not that. It's simply just rocks in space keep smacking our Earth, and it floods everything, and it's just a reset. Their contention, and what I strongly agree with, is that if something like that were to happen today, there would be pockets of us that did survive, but we wouldn't know how to make, synthesizers or anything like that, but we would still have the knowledge of it. And that's kind of what you find when you look in the past of a lot of things. You always find like there was some teacher who came with a bunch of information about like agriculture, husbandry. So you can imagine if you or I were to escape to, let's say, just like the Aboriginals in Australia, or if we were to live with a primitive tribe down in South America, if we were to escape to that from our destroyed world, essentially, we would have knowledge and we would have these, black little magic mirrors in our pockets with no true, like you or I can't make that thing, but we know how to use it. So that's what Graham Hancock and a bunch of other people kind of believe happened, and so do I. Is that we keep getting to it? Maybe it's not computers or like electricity that we plug stuff into, but we seem to get to a high level and a reset happen.
Whatever the Egyptians were doing, I think they were the most advanced civilization that ever existed. I don't think we can do what they did. The precision in which they built it, I really don't think we can do that. Just the symmetry of the faces of the statues is unparalleled, and they're immense. These are monstrously huge, perfectly symmetrical faces.
Right.
Their temples are insanely intricate.
They were incredibly advanced.
Incredibly advanced.
With math, with science, with technology.
Certainly with geometry. 20-ton gigantic stone blocks that were taken from a mountain 500 miles away. And no one has any idea how the fuck they got them.
Nobody has any clue.
No guess.
Right.
There's some guesses about, maybe the river system was different back then. Whatever. How are you getting that 50-ton chunk of granite out of a fucking mountain and moving it down, even with modern equipment? How are you getting it over the mountain?
The ancient Egyptians, another one of those civilizations that seems like they happened upon their, their culture and civilization, because from what I've heard, and even that guy Zahi Hawass, who is against all this kind of stuff, will agree with you that there seems to be a point of really, really good, epic construction, and then it diminished. You would think any civilization kind of gets better over time, but in the Egyptian case, it seems to, as time progressed, construction got worse and worse. You see the pyramids that look like steps that look all weird, and they're like lopsided because they're nothing compared to the Great Pyramid. So it goes again to that theory that they have been around way longer. The Sphinx is another big one. That's the guy, Robert Schoch. He's from the University of Boston. And he's the guy who, back in the 90s, or it might have been early 2000s, that proposed that the erosion around the Sphinx was all water erosion and not wind like previously thought. Because if you can go and look at it, you can see how it looks like kind of like something the Grand Canyon would make. It's on a much smaller scale, but you see how water would make like divots in the limestone that's there, whereas you look at wind and it's more like swept away like sand dune. Egypt is one of those places that now that they're doing more of that ground penetrating radar, they're finding that there's footprints of a lot more pyramids. Same thing in the Amazon jungle. Again, we're way older, folks.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives.
This video pretty much speaks for itself. Um, I've always disliked the chemtrail thing being a conspiracy theory. It's another one that people that aren't into the subject immediately just dismiss without any prior knowledge whatsoever. But you look into it, and they've been doing it since pretty much the 1940s, whether it's between cloud seeding or Skyfire was one. I believe it was from the 50s to the 60s, where they were trying to stop lightning from, starting the wildfires out west, and they were trying to experiment whether they certain type of cloud with this this iodized silver and anodized silver would basically stop lightning from causing fires. It's something that they've done for a while now. Whether or not the contrails that we see are spreading chemicals, but at the same time, it's straight from the horse's mouth. Neil Brennan, he's literally saying pretty much what we've been called tinfoil hattists forever for. It's like they want to literally spread stratospheric aerosol into the atmosphere with particulates to block the sun. That's literally Simpsons, when Burns wanted to block the sun.
Our moon. I can sit here and I can drag out a blackboard and show you mathematically this body, Earth, does not have the gravitational mass to capture a moon that big and hold it. And then not only hold it in a tidal lock. There's also, if you would check with Cherokee and the Hopi Indians, they have history before white man ever showed up of moonless nights, meaning the moon wasn't there. Then there's Neil Armstrong and all his stuff. They put seismographs and plotters on the moon. That was the first thing they set out in their instruments. Then they got up and fired the upper section back into the moon. When it crashed, the moon resonated like a bell, and it rang for hours.
Had to come downstairs. It was getting creepy up there. It's the first time my fiance's been able to work since her hip replacements, and I was getting creeped out up there being all alone. Quite frankly, this is a really old house. I'll get some more ghosty videos in. I'm not against them. I don't believe they're exactly what a lot of the shows would have you believe they are. But anyway, had to come down here. It was getting creeped out up there. This is David Adair. You might recognize him because he's one of the guys back in 2001 that Stephen Greer had on the national press conference for the disclosure of the alien stuff. I believe he was one of the guys who talked about the UFOs and crafts coming to nuclear silos and just shutting everything down. That in itself is pretty interesting. More stuff about the moon. Uh, Again, the moon's always fascinated me. I recently broke down Chat GPT. I like to mess with it with conspiracies and stuff. Just continuously keep asking it until I'm like so succinct that it finally just gives up. And I'll give you an example. And this is me. I didn't say anything about a telescope. You can go outside and with our eyeballs see that 50-mile crater, Tycho, that's 240,000 miles away. Yet 50 miles viewed from a mere 234 miles, and I'm referencing the ISS space station, is indiscernible. And I get this answer. You are correct, and I apologize for misunderstanding your point. The apparent contradiction between the visibility of a 50-mile crater on the moon from a distance of 240,000 miles and the difficulty in discerning similar size features on Earth from a much closer distance, i.e., 234 miles, is indeed puzzling. When you break down the AI, you're doing something right. Because beforehand, it'll just give you kind of just like boilerplate answers. It's like the viewing angle makes it look weird, but if you've watched any videos of the ISS other than my video, you'll notice that 50 miles from even 230 plus miles where they're supposedly in orbit, 50 miles indiscernible. That's like from where I live to Syracuse, New York. You can see it. It goes away pretty quickly. Those are my little questions. I know I'm probably just being dumb because I don't know exactly what's going on, but it's things that I like to question that are pretty interesting. A lot of these trail cam videos and Ring doorbell ones, for that matter, always kind of bum me out. There's something that cameras do when they don't have a fast enough shutter rate. You'll see it a lot on like plane propellers sometimes, how they look kind of funky. It's because the frame rate isn't going as fast, so it's rendering this odd looking shape. Someone walking by your Ring doorbell can do that sometimes too, especially if it has bad visibility. It'll kind of look like a ghost is going by just because it's not rendering the person. This video, I believe, is exactly like that. You can see something coming in and it's just messing with the frame rate, and whether or not it's a deer, raccoon, or a person doesn't really get to me at all.
I'm down by Skinwalker Ranch right now, probably about 20 miles from it, and these clouds
What time is it?
are like flashing, yeah. I don't know if you can see the ones over there, but all the clouds around here, they're like flashing red.
Flashing red. What the heck?
I've always loved hearing about Skinwalker Ranch. I grew up hearing about it, especially when, uh-oh. I've always loved hearing about Skinwalker Ranch. Again, one of those things I heard about from Art Bell talking about Bigelow owning it with NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. Um, but now it's under new ownership, and I think I might know what's going on in that video because you can see in one of their episodes that they put a whole bunch of drones up in the air, and the prominent color of these drones is red. So that's what I'm probably thinking is happening in this video. I'd have to check out the date and do a little digging, but not to take away from the weird things that happen at this ranch. One thing they haven't brought up since the very first episode, and I bring it up to all my friends who watch it too, is when they're sitting around that round table in the beginning, they bring out a piece of neodymium magnet. And I remember hearing about these because they used to put them in the old Alpine speakers when you put a sound system in your car. What I'm thinking is that there's just high magnetic anomalies that are happening here, and that's why there's so many phenomenon that happens, whether it's with cameras or their gear that that shows like certain points going like underground above it. Who knows what's actually going on there? The show's actually pretty good. I mean, History Channel isn't one of those places that's a go-to for, like scholarly information anymore. It's just become like an entertainment channel ever since Ancient Aliens. But I do enjoy this. It's not so much, like the ghost shows that I've talked about where it's just a lot of noises and nothing happening. This is actually pretty riveting. Some of it gets kind of silly. Their rocket launches get a little excessive, but they're getting data from those rocket launches, and it's one of the only few ways they can actually see that something's going on up at the point in the sky. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, and I apologize, but check the show out. It's not too bad. I won't steer you wrong, I promise.
Jeremy Corbell is the one who released that video. And today he dropped yet another image of a separate UFO sighting. It's being called the Chandelier UFO because of its shape. A new documentary series hosted by Corbell shows the moment he speaks to an unidentified U.S. intelligence official about this puzzling image.
So what was the most impressive thing to you about this video, which the world has not seen yet?
It makes no sense. It is just the most bizarre structure with no purpose and speed. As everyone across the intelligence community is asking questions what this thing is. There's seemingly no place for anyone to sit on. It's just a bizarre shape.
All right, we have the picture of the Chandelier UFO, as it's being called, but where's the video? Let's bring in investigative journalist Jeremy Corbell to find out. So what's the answer? Where's the video, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's part of the story, and I think I'm going to have to answer that at another time. But I will say this, is that there is more footage. That is a fact. So some people got to see portions of it within the intelligence community, and I'm so happy that people are coming forward.
The intelligence analyst that you interviewed in the documentary about the Chandelier video said that UFO, quote, made no sense. What was he talking about, and what else is unusual about that one?
Right. So to answer your first question, why is it an image and not a video? Because as a journalist, I can obtain and release certain things that do not have a problem with national security. It doesn't jeopardize our national security. So sometimes when I obtain things, I can create and put out a still image from a video. But there are sensitive things about releasing military film footage, especially incursions in military bases. So the chandelier one, you're seeing an image like the Mosul Orb, which is another military filmed UAP that I put out with George Knapp, my mentor in journalism, right? So this is just another image. Now, I hope the full video of the chandelier UAP does come out. We're even having pressure from inside of government to get answers from the inspector general of the intelligence community. But as a journalist, I can put this out in good conscience and say, this is what's going on. Now, why it was unique. Well, the heat signature is unlike anything I've ever seen before, but also the people that have seen the full videos within the intelligence community, they report to me that there's no flight control surfaces. They don't know how this thing was maneuvering the way it was and just kind of rotating. It is an unknown. It's not US capable. We don't know whose it is, and that is a problem.
This is Jeremy Corbell. You might recognize him. He was the guy who was with Bob Lazar on the Joe Rogan Experience. Bob Lazar, again, the guy who claims he worked at S4, essentially like an Area 51, and reverse engineered craft, or at least was around people that was getting, material that was supposedly from these crafts. He just goes into it in much more detail on the Joe Rogan Experience. Another one of those guys. I'm not going to put him as bad as Dr. Stephen Greer, but another one of those dudes that I feel like something about him seems a little off, but it could just be because he's just so into what he does, and that's just how that comes out in him. He's released these new videos, the chandelier, well, rather, the video of the jellyfish and the still image of the chandelier. Oddly enough, that chandelier one kind of looks like those videos you see on YouTube that show what angels really look like, or rather what they're described when they're actually drawn out. They look kind of scary. They look like they're from Neon Genesis Evangelion. They're very scary looking, especially when you kind of look at like Ezekiel's wheel. It's like, is this kind of what the ancients were seeing? Is it what we're seeing now? Who knows? The jellyfish looks to me more like a cloaked device of some sort. There was a debunked video where there's like a celebration that happens in the Middle East, and it kind of looks like a balloon. Kind of look like it, but the way it moves, and from what Jeremy describing, going over the bay and sinking into the water, whether that's true or not, it doesn't seem like that'd be the behavior of one of these balloons. I think high tech stuff is tested in actual war zones. We could be looking at some sort of like low flying drone that, because remember what they said was that it wasn't seen with a naked eye, only be seen on the thermal. So this could be just something that looks like a man could probably be set in and just fly it around. It could have been just a test run.
Just watching these ass clowns on the studio set of the Moon. There's more strings here than a bloody puppet show. This bloke even gets shot by an arrow in the leg. Ouch. Let's have another look. Oh, sorry, it's just another wire. My bad. Hey, you don't mind if I get some fresh air, do you, boys? It's bloody hot under this visor. Now, should we do some scientific shit while we're up here, or... Oh, I just prefer to throw shit around if that's okay, boys. Baby, kiss me. Hey, Mick, bring back those bloody Eskies. Anyone for rock soccer? Now, just hold me up with those wires, boys, while I lean forward. Wow, too far, you bastards. All right, pull me back up, you flaming drongos. Now, let me stick this bloody flag in. How's that look, princess? Oh, yay, yay, it almost looks real. Righto, let's piss off and head to the pub.
Yeah, the guy's voiceover is a little annoying, but it was kind of only one I could find where it was a compilation of just their basically like physical movements on the moon and how it just looks so silly. And especially that takeoff at the end. And I think it might be a generational thing, whereas someone in my generation from like the 80s on up can kind of look at that and see that it's silly. Whereas someone that happened during their lifetime, where they saw it on TV, are more apt to believe it. And I'll liken it to this. when they first started making motion pictures, there's that famous video of the train coming at the screen, and you would have audiences just jumping out of their seats. Fast forward to the 30s and like the Lon Chaney era where they were having like the creature from the Black Lagoon. Women were puking when they saw this like spongy like creature that just had like a fish suit on it. You or me right now looking at that costume would laugh. I think it's the same thing. Like the claymation dinosaurs from the Twilight Zone. People are like, oh my God, this looks amazing. And it's just because it's just something that humans, it's like the hypnotizing factor. So now, when you look at that video and the Technicolor explosion coming off and just their movements, it gets kind of silly after a while.